In any other medium, a change in perspective is an easy way to flesh out a world, raise the stakes, or just keep things fresh, but in gaming it can cause significant headaches. Not only does the person behind the controls stay the same, ruining the point right off the bat, but also it's not uncommon for the player to prefer one avatar over another, especially if they had time to get attached. If you take something away from somebody, it's easy for them to not like what you replace it with. How can a character change work well in this medium? How can a player gel with an entirely new POV, especially after supposedly syncing up with someone else? And how can a game communicate that the player is controlling a completely different person than they were before? First off, let's work on avoiding some of the baggage that comes with an avatar change in the gaming medium. An easy problem to run into in a narrative game is when the prior character knows something that the new guy does not. Take for example this Catwoman chapter in Arkham City. After Batman gets sucker punched and drugged, the game suddenly shifts to see what Catwoman's up to. While Catwoman is indifferent to Batman's situation, the player might be invested and essentially desync from their avatar, rebelling from the story. It's always important to keep that harmony in mind whenever jumping between multiple points of view. The new character should gel with the player's motivation. For perhaps a bit of a meta example of a game pulling this off is the transition from Snake to Raiden in MGS2. Players wanted more of Solid Snake after MGS1, but even after teasing that in the first sequence where you get everything that the audience could have wanted, the game permanently shifts to this new lamer character who's constantly getting emasculated. The player wants to be the cooler guy, but so does their character. Raiden and MGS2 in general are always copying Snake and MGS1. The idea is to subvert expectations and make a point about sequels, games, and the velocity of culture. I hesitate to break it down any further since it's Metal Gear and we'd be here all day, but one thing I do want to touch on is that since Snake is non-playable after the Tinker, he's allowed to be as cool as the writer wants. A player character can only be as cool as the player themselves, but once a character is out of the audience's hands, they're free to do whatever. For Snake, this means he gets to stop asking stupid questions, and he even gets to set up elaborate ruses to overthrow the conspirators running stuff from behind the scenes, which is a pretty satisfying yet natural change from the first game. If MGS2 is somehow a bit too subtle for you, allow me to take another example out of the lesser-known King Kong game for the GameCube. Similarly to the prior example, you play the majority of the game not as who you might expect, in this case the titular giant monkey, but as some wimp named Jack. It's initially disappointing to have to play as one of these tiny shipwrecked humans, but the game is actually a satisfying and surprisingly terrifying survival horror game, where you have to take out giant monsters while counting your ammunition without a HUD. This makes the levels where you actually get to be the big monkey extremely cathartic, since you're taking out previously invincible dinosaurs with moves that wouldn't be out of place in the WWE. It does suck going back to scrapping for bullets though. One reason playing as Kong is so fun is that you get to see different perspectives of the world. Kong and Jack are fighting the same mobs for the most part, but they act completely different. These dinosaurs are a big pain for Jack, usually an excuse to unload some ammo, but Kong can kill them without even realizing they're there. That's a bit of an extreme example, but if two different characters approach the same problem the same way, then what's the point of making them different entities in the first place? V from DMC5 never came across as very interesting for a lot of reasons, but mainly he's just too mobile and powerful. He's supposed to be weak and frail compared to the other selectable heroes, but he's just not weak enough. He's always safe, which means you're always free to dodge, and his offensive tools just aren't nearly as complex as Dante or Nero, so his fights are forced to be incredibly simple. Compare that to the difference between MGR's Raiden and Blade Wolf, where the latter has a drastically smaller move pool and less HP, so tough enemies become twice as much trouble, even mano a mano. That incentivizes stealth, which offers a new playstyle and fleshes out the new guy's perspective on the world at the same time. Another good example would actually be Catwoman from earlier. While the story mode doesn't always seem to work out, mechanically the character has silent running and weak mobility, so she sees the same environment completely differently when it comes to getting around. It's kind of bizarre to be sprinting everywhere on foot in one of these types of games, but it's really satisfying and leads to unique challenges. The takeaway is that a change in perspective should feel new and different without conflicting with the player's motivations. The character change should leave the player in the same shoes as their avatar without either person knowing more than the other does. The shift can be a cathartic power trip or a desperate struggle compared to the previous host, but the transition should try to avoid falling in between to avoid feeling samey. A dev may be unable to change the person behind the controls, but by seeing things from a new perspective, maybe the person behind the controls can change.